Alrighty guys, it is Qaaman here today, and today I want to bring up a very big point that I've always wanted to share about Super Saiyan transformations, and today I want to talk to you guys about Super Saiyan 3, and why I feel like out of all of the Dragon Ball transformations that we ever have, I feel like this one has kind of been thrown to the back burner more than anything else. And let me go into the history of this in this conversation and kind of bring up and debate my points. So when we initially saw Super Saiyan 3 during the Buu arc, Goku was fighting against Fat Buu. It was an awesome transformation. For those of you who are familiar with the dub, it had its own theme song, and this form really took the community by storm. And then, you know, up until the point where Dragon Ball GT didn't exist, Super Saiyan 3 was this unique form where Goku was ripped, he didn't have any eyebrows, he had this long hair, and it was just a very different looking form compared to obviously Super Saiyan 1, Super Saiyan 2, Kaioken, and the whole 9 yards. So for the longest time, Super Saiyan 3 was kind of like the weird punk rock star of the Dragon Ball transformations, like the one form that was like really out there, and then it eventually ended up becoming a totally useless form. When we go through the history of this technique, in Dragon Ball Z, this form was only successful in holding off Fat Buu, holding off Kid Buu, and in the case of Gotenks, it was a surprise transformation that, once again, simply just held off Super Buu. Every single time that this transformation has been used, it's always been used in a situation in which it was only good for a burst to slightly hold your own against a significantly more powerful foe, and then when you ran out of this power, you were kinda screwed. I think the best analogy to describe Super Saiyan 3 for Dragon Ball transformations would have to be comparing it to the Kaioken. And that's why I've come to the conclusion that Super Saiyan 3 is essentially the Kaioken equivalent of Super Saiyan forms, but it just does a worse job. It's like a temporary boost in power that can somewhat get you on par with your opponents, but then quickly over time it's become completely irrelevant and useless. And then when we go on to Dragon Ball GT, the same issue once again happened where Kid Goku was a child and didn't have an adult body, so he couldn't maintain that transformation. And in Dragon Ball Super, we kind of see a very interesting twist with the Super Saiyan 3 form. In the case of Vegeta, even till this very day, has never learned this transformation, and I think that long-term looking at it, Super Saiyan 3's conception was only so limited to where we look at it today, because Vegeta hasn't even bothered to learn it, even though he has a body that is more than capable of learning Super Saiyan 3 at this point in the series, and he's learned transformations that are far beyond the capabilities of a Super Saiyan 3. And in the case of Gotenks, in Dragon Ball Super, Gotenks never really went Super Saiyan 3 for any point in time, and only did it against Beerus in the manga. So looking at it from that point of view, once again, we always get into this point where Super Saiyan 3 is either a burst, or it's used for a character just for demonstration. And I think Super Saiyan 3 is more about flash than fire when we truly get over to the Tournament of Power. So if you guys can remember, Caulifla was extremely interested in learning about the Super Saiyan 3 form, which is why I chose to put a Super Saiyan 3 Caulifla for the thumbnail of this video, because I think Caulifla really brought up how this form truly actually is. Super Saiyan 3, when you think about it for a character like Caulifla or Kefla and Kale, wouldn't really be a viable form. Kefla's Super Saiyan 2 form was able to fight against a Super Saiyan Blue Goku, and it forced Goku to go into his Ultra Instinct state. And I'm not trying to make this into a power scaling video, but it's to tell you that when you look at how strong a Super Saiyan 2 Kefla is compared to the overwhelming majority of Dragon Ball characters, Kefla doesn't really need to learn Super Saiyan 3 at all, and if she were to learn it, it would be great and powerful, but it wouldn't really allow her to get anywhere with her actual abilities, considering the fact that her Super Saiyan 2 state would be able to last longer, and we would get to the point of Dragon Ball where endurance actually outweighs the slight benefit that you would get from that Super Saiyan 3, assuming you can't defeat your opponent extremely quickly. And that is why I feel like Super Saiyan 3 has always been a lot more about the flash instead of the fire. It's always been about the demonstration instead of how actually good the form is. And then one thing that I found really showed this more than anything, guys, would have to be when Goku had that brief sparring moment with Future Trunks during the Zamasu Future Trunks arc. And when we see Goku sparring against Trunks for that brief point in time, very similar to when we saw Goku demonstrating Super Saiyan against Trunks during the Trunks arc, ironically, in the Android arc. The interesting thing about all of this, guys, is the fact that it was once again just purely a demonstration on Goku's behalf to show Trunks that he has this form. And then when Trunks saw Vegeta and he was talking to Vegeta about it, it's like, hey, do you have this form too? And Vegeta's like, no, I have even better than this. It once again shows you how viably useless this form truly is, because it's only been used for a demonstration and to just show that the form actually exists. So then when we look at Dragon Ball video games, the argument now becomes a lot more about, is this form just there to exist for Dragon Ball fans? Does Super Saiyan 3 in the modern state of Dragon Ball exist only to sell toys and just to have it in video games? Or does it actually have any usage? Because when you think about it, Super Saiyan has still gotten a lot of usage throughout Dragon Ball Super, the most recent, accolade of Dragon Ball, considering the fact that Super Saiyan is often used as a base form for characters to use to gauge how strong their opponent is, and then after ascending into Super Saiyan, then characters just go into more powerful forms one by one by one. And in many cases, Goku's actually used the Super Saiyan 2 state a lot more than his actual Super Saiyan 1 state throughout Dragon Ball Super, in addition to going straight into Blue and God and more of those forms. So when you actually think about it, I've always found it hilarious that looking at the Super Saiyan form, it's been the form that has been skipped because it's kind of in limbo. You have this form that's like more powerful than 1 and 2, but like uses more energy than God and Blue, that's not as sustainable, so it's completely obsolete at this point in Dragon Ball history. And when you look at the fight between Goku, Beerus, and on King Kai's planet, I felt like that was an early fight in Dragon Ball Super, despite how horrible the animation was, that really illustrated how Dragon Ball has transitioned, where the series is now about it demonstrating what characters can actually do, as opposed to actually being the most efficient with your transformations and fighting at your absolute peak. And at that point in Dragon Ball Super, Goku's best form was Super Saiyan 3, and it's funny how Goku's best form at the beginning of the series has actually become less relevant than his Super Saiyan 1 and his Super Saiyan 2 forms. So guys, when you ultimately sum up the story of Super Saiyan 3, I feel like from a child's point of view, this has always been the transformation that kind of was out there more than anything else. Super Saiyan 4, I think when you compare Super Saiyan 4 to Super Saiyan 3, probably has a more unique design, as it has like the fur, it has the actual tail, their eye colors change, the black hair. It's more of a primal state. And I think that the thing about Super Saiyan 4 that really made it awesome in Dragon Ball GT, despite how canon GT actually is that Super Saiyan 4 was a transformation that felt completely authentic to the Super Saiyan forms. When you look at how the Ozaru state was originally introduced in Dragon Ball and then going into Dragon Ball Z with the Saiyans, Super Saiyan 4 seems like something that would have been a realistic adaptation of the Ozaru state, considering the fact that the Saiyans forms that we knew before that were just going into these primal large apes. And then when we got to Super Saiyan, it seemed like the whole transition of having these angelic-like characters with this blonde hair or white hair, if you want to go with the manga, because Toriyama didn't want to color in the hair anymore, and then their eyes colors change. That kind of seemed to be more of like a controlled human state of the Super Saiyan form, and Super Saiyan 4 was like the ultimate primal hybrid of all of this, whereas Super Saiyan 3 kind of just felt like, okay, like this is like a really long-haired version of what we had already seen before that looks completely different, but eventually in the long term does absolutely nothing for the Dragon Ball franchise. And my final take that I'll make is that although I love the design of the Super Saiyan 3, and I do think it's had some great fights, especially in Wrath of the Dragon, where we actually see Goku using it to defeat Hirudegarn, or Goku had an awesome battle with Janemba in Fusion Reborn, it never really did anything for the Dragon Ball franchise in the long run, and I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comment section below as to what you guys think about the Super Saiyan 3 form, and I greatly appreciate all of you guys for listening to my uncut, in-depth thoughts and analysis on the Super Saiyan 3 forms today. So with everything else said, please remember to rate, comment, and subscribe. Remember, as I always say, to have a great day, guys, and let me know what you think about Super Saiyan 3.